Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Intro to Sinatra. I always forget how fun this section is. Again, like I've said to some of you, I think that the Sinatra section just covers so much. Last week we were doing sequel, this week we're doing active record. And then the third week of this, we're building applications in the browser. So this is really a really important bridge. And I'm just really excited for you all. I think you're all going to feel really powerful, like wizards, really soon. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So I'm just kind of building off again. This is the same application that we built on Tuesday, just adding more and more onto it. Something that I wanted to go over today before we really get into the rest of the stuff is talk about a seed file. Once we talk about the seed file, I'm going to dive into Sinatra. We're going to talk about really quickly how the internet works with its request and response cycles. And then I'm just going to do a super quick intro, actually kind of just really introduce you to one HTTP verb or method. We're going to talk about MVC. We'll have a deeper dive into MVC and HTTP verbs / methods when we come back from the program and how when we come back from the break and how those relate to CRUD and RESTful routing. We're also going to talk about Rack today, super quickly. Again, really just a quick intro to Rack. Then we're going to take this application that we have right now and bootstrap it so that it can run with Sinatra. And you'll see how easy it is with the Sinatra gem to just take what we have already and turn it into a live application. There'll be a quick intro to ERB, probably not too much, and that will kind of coincide with making your first web page. Are there any questions about any of this stuff or any of the material that we covered yesterday? I know we ended a little bit abruptly, but we're going to do a quick review of the has many through relationships in the seed file. It'll be kind of like a meshed review. All right. So as you may have seen, generally when we are working with our applications, I have to kind of open up the console and do some coding in there to kind of get my application up and running, get some information in the database, right? If you want to put a bunch of dummy information into your application so that when it starts up, you don't have just an empty database, right? You can use what's called a seed file. If you used Faker in your CLI project, you may remember that Faker is a gem that creates dummy data for you. It creates names, it creates addresses, it creates etc. Right? So yeah, so we can basically use our seed file for the same thing. We can create instances of data that we want our application to come prepackaged with, so that we don't have to do everything inside of the console. So I believe in our database already, we already have like Jurassic Park. Did we do that? I don't know. Hold on. Actually, maybe it'll be worth it to see what we have in the console already. I think we actually had we made like Primary River and Jen and Chris as. So say read console. And if you could remember to mute yourself if you have a microphone on, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have Primary River, Get Money, and Sinatra as our movies. And our directors, we have Jen and Chris. And then I don't think that we created any actors. Oh, and I forgot to require the actors in my actor role. Yeah, okay, so I know that I don't have any of those. So in our seed file, we can go ahead and use this as a file where we just write, we write these instances that we want to have in our database. So again, I think yesterday the example I was using was Jurassic Park. We can say movie.new, and then we can say the title is Jurassic Park. And then we can say something like Steven Spielberg is the director. Steven Spielberg, I think is his name. Okay. And then we can say something like the director of this movie is Steven Spielberg, right? Sorry, I should use the create method, right? I can use the create, or I can save each one individually. And then I can say like jp.save once I've changed the director. And then I want to create an actor. So I can say like Laura Dern was the actor that I gave yesterday. Actor.new or create. And her name is Laura Dern. And then I can, remember, I want to associate Laura Dern, right? Laura Dern was an actor in Jurassic Park. She plays Ellie Sattler in the movie. So I can do a couple things. I can make a new instance of a join model. I can say role.create. I can say the movie is Jurassic Park. I can say the actor is Laura Dern. And then I can say and then whenever you're forgetting what columns you have in your database, you can always look at your schema. So I know that the role also has, okay, great. So in the seed file, I can say role is Ellie Sattler. Cool. So again, you can use this file to create a bunch of data so that when you begin your application, all of this information is already in there, right? So in order to run your seed file, there's actually a rake task for that. Oops. So there's this rake db seed task, and it says it loads the seed data from db seeds. And I always do that. I always name it singular seed when it should be plural seeds. And I have something in the chat. Okay. All right. So again, you can use Faker in here. Let's say that you have an application that has, locations. You can establish all the locations in here. If you have characters or video game personalities, you can put all this information in here so that when your application runs, you have all of this data already set up. So I want to run rake db seed. Oops, I'm not in my. Change the title of this. And then when I open up rake console, if I go to movie.all, what did I do? Something didn't work. Oh, it's not done yet. Yeah, there's Jurassic Park. Movie.find by, I can say movie.find by title. Jurassic Park. Save it here. I can say, what is the director of this movie, right? The director of Jurassic Park was Steven Spielberg. I can ask which actors are in this movie. And I get a return of all of the actors that are in this movie, right? Laura Dern is an actor in this movie. She's the only actress that I put in so far. But again, we have access to all of these methods because we use these macros in our model files. Remember that the relationship between an actor and a movie is a many-to-many relationship, right? So we need the join model. The join model is a role, and in my seed file, I created a new instance of a role to create that association. one thing that I did want to show you was that there's another way that we can also build this relationship. I can say, so Jeff Goldblum is also in this movie, like I said yesterday, and his name, Jeff Goldblum, am I spelling this right? Goldblum. I'm really not great with celebrities. This is really the only movie that I care about. So Jeff Goldblum, okay. And if I want to say that Jeff Goldblum was in Jurassic Park, I can actually say Jurassic Park.actors and then shovel in Jeff Goldblum, right? We kind of did this yesterday, but remember the difference yesterday was that this was a has-many relationship, a has-many belongs to relationship. Now the relationship that we're working with is a many-to-many. Remember that the thing that we need to create a many-to-many relationship is an instance of the join model. Well, all I did right here was shovel the instance of Jeff Goldblum into the actors array for Jurassic Park. However, if I were to look at role.all, let's see. Oh no, did it not work? I thought it was supposed to create one for me. Okay, so I guess this is the problem. This should work though. Role.all, actor create, so Jeff Goldblum.movies. He's there. Why is this not working? I was under the impression that this also worked with joins. Let's see if I restart the console. So if I say actors, still in there, but the role, did not create a role. How is that possible?
Chris, did you save it after you shoveled it?
Did I save what?
The movie that you shoveled it into.
Well, here's the thing is I shoveled it in, and when even though I closed the console and brought it back up, it still comes up in the actors array. So I didn't have to save it. It's weird. So Jurassic Park.actors says Jeff Goldblum, and then if I say Jeff Goldblum, like actor.all, if I know Jeff Goldblum is the last actor, and I ask him what movies he's in, it also comes up there, but there's no instance of a join model. So how does that work? It's very confusing. There should be an instance of a role that relates the two of these together. Oh, here it is. Oh my God, it's right here. I just didn't see it because it wasn't broken into several individual lines. Okay, it's there. I just couldn't see it. And I also didn't give it a role name because I didn't ever give him his character. So yes, okay, so what I was trying to prove was right. Yep, it was there the whole time. Sorry about that. So whenever there's a many-to-many relationship, right, we can use the shovel operator, and the shovel operator will automatically create an instance of the join for us. The only thing to note is, again, if there's special information that the join model has, for instance, the information about the role, this maybe isn't the best way to do it. It's probably better to do it explicitly like I did here. Create the role instance and then make sure that you give it the information that it needs. But I just wanted to show you that we can use this seed file, right, to prepare our applications with data beforehand. And one thing that I would remind you is that, so let's say that you've written the seed file, and then later down the line you're like, I need to put more things in here. Well, whenever you run your seed file, it just reads it from top to bottom. It's not like migrations where it keeps track of what you've already created and what you haven't. So if I were to run the seed file again, I would get duplicates of everything. All of this would be duplicated. So generally what I have students do is at the top of your seed file, write methods that destroy or that just destroy all instances for each class that you made. That way you won't have duplicates when you run your C file. Does that make sense? Like, again, if I were to run this seed file again, I would have 2 Jurassic Parks in my database, 2 Steven Spielbergs, 2 Laura Derns, and then if I were to run it again, I would have 3 of each, right? And in order to prevent this, the very first line of code in our seeds file should say, destroy all the movies that we have, destroy all the directors that we have. Again, this is if you're kind of more in the testing phase of your application. If you have special data in here, then you wouldn't, of course, want to delete all of the rows in your database. But if you're just trying to get things started and you don't want to have duplicates, you can either destroy them all at the beginning or create rewrite your seed file every time. Are there any questions about the seed file? This will definitely become something that you all use when you're developing your applications, without a doubt. Okay. All right, so we can leave that behind from yesterday, and then we can start diving into Sinatra. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk with you all about is the internet request response cycle. So have you ever thought about, whenever you go to a website, if I go to google.com, what is actually happening? What is actually happening when I go to Google? What's happening is I'm in the browser. I've kind of put in an internet address, right? I'm sending this address and communicating with the server that I'm connected to via the internet. And I'm saying, this is the website I'm trying to go to, direct me in the right direction, right? The internet is going to say, google.com, okay, we know where that's located. We'll take you there. When I arrive at google.com in the internet, it's going to say, hey, someone is visiting your homepage. Based on the URL that they gave you, we can infer that they want to see the homepage. And the servers at Google are like, okay, someone's trying to visit just google.com. I'm going to send them back the information necessary to render the homepage, just because we didn't, if I were to type in something here saying like Sinatra NBC, now look at how the URL has changed, and I'm providing more information. And based on what's in the URL, Google is sending me back different information for me to display on my screen, right? So the behavior is like this. I'm in my browser, I make a click, or I type in something into my URL, right? Or into the bar here, right? And when I press enter or I make a click, I send a request to the server. The server interprets the information from my request, and it determines what information to send back to me that I see in the browser, right? And with that response, the browser receives it and then shows me a page. This is called the request response cycle. Are there any questions or something I can clarify about the request or response cycle? It's pretty straightforward, right? We, as the clients in the browser, make a request. The server interprets our request, talks to the application about what we should send back, and then the application decides, okay, if it's the homepage, send them this information, right? The information arrives in my browser interprets it, and then shows me what I want to see, or what the server thinks I want to see based on my URL on the screen. The quick note that I wanted to make about HTTP verbs or HTTP methods is that whenever we're navigating around the internet, we're always not only sending the URL, right, that we're trying to navigate to, but we can also be sending parameters. For instance, if we look at our Google URL here, we can see that after this search, we have a question mark, and generally things that follow question marks that have equal signs are parameters. So Google is not only receiving the URL from us, but it's also saying, okay, there are several search parameters here, right? And again, the point that I want to make is when we're clicking something, right, or we're typing in something into the bar and pressing enter, the type of request that we're making is called a GET request. there are 5 requests that we can make in the internet, but the most common one that we make when we're surfing around, clicking from here, clicking to there, going to different pages, is called a GET request. So the URL, the type of request that we're making, and the parameters in the URL, or as you'll see soon, as the curriculum continues, there are other ways in which we can send parameters to the server, right? These 3 things all determine what the application decides to return back. So I'll put that here. The URL, the HTTP verb, or the HTTP method, and any parameters all determine what gets sent back. Server and ultimately displayed. Right. So again, I just went to Google, I typed in Sinatra MBC, I pressed enter, I sent this request to the server. The server says, hey, there's someone on Google, they typed in Sinatra MBC, and it's a search, it's a GET request, right? The server takes these 3 bits of information, determines that they want to show me the page of results for the thing that I typed in. It bundles it all up and sends it in a package that my browser can interpret. The browser interprets the HTML, the JavaScript, anything else that is required to showing me that page. And voila, this is what I get as the client, right? So keeping this request response cycle in mind, people who there's a pattern of building applications that emerge from this, and it's called MVC. MVC is the application pattern that Sinatra uses to build this application, and it's a pattern that completely envelops every aspect of this request response cycle. So to take MVC a little bit further, or take this diagram rather of the request response cycle and make it more specific to the tune of how Sinatra would interpret the request response cycle, we have a diagram like this, right? So here we are in the browser, right? And we make a request to a route. A route is another word for a URL, right? So in the browser, I can type in, again, Google, right? Google.com is a route, essentially, right? Google.com would go to a route, and then there's this controller. It's a bit of our application that is kind of like the switchboard. It's like, okay, we've just received a request to go to Google's homepage. What should we do? The controller determines the action, right? On our application, we will see that we want to hook up active record. We want to hook up our database to what users can potentially see, right? So let's say that I'm taking this application that I'm making about movies, and someone wants to see all of the movies in my database. Well, maybe there's a route, right, that I want a user to go to called like chrissmovies.com/all of my movies, right? And I would determine that in the controller, saying, hey, there's a route that I have specific logic for, right? If a user is coming to see all of my movies, then this is what I would expect to happen. In order for a user to see all of my movies, I would have to go talk to the database, right? I would have to tell Active Record, go and collect all of the movies for me so that I can show them to the user, right? We can't have this step without going and discussing with the database, without consulting the database, right? So in my controller action, I can tell my database, hey, again, or if we were just to look at one movie, maybe we just wanted to look at Jurassic Park and we just wanted to see the actors and the director and the description of the movie, I could tell my database, hey, just go retrieve me Jurassic Park, because this is based on what the user input. The user might input something like chrissmovies.com/Jurassic Park. This now becomes a parameter in my URL, right? So I could say that somebody said, somebody made a GET request, right? Meaning somebody typed into their URL to their URL bar, their address bar in their browser, to go to chrissmovies.com/Jurassic Park. They made a GET request with the parameter or with the URL of Jurassic Park, right? In the controller, I can say this means to me that they're trying to just look at one specific movie. So I can go talk to the model, and I can say, hey, Active Record, using the, the methods that we know that Active Record's given us, we can say, just return to me the movie with the title Jurassic Park. Once the controller has that movie, then I can say, all right, I've determined a template of an HTML page that I want the user to ultimately see this in, right? Every website is just full of HTML, right? Google has had somebody design the HTML for this page, right? But notice how, it's like if we type in dinosaurs or we type in plants, notice how the format for each of these result pages is basically the same. It's just the content that's filled that's a little bit different, right? We can think of our views in the same way. Our views are templates of what the user wants to see, but the content is ultimately going to be different, right? If somebody looks at Jurassic Park as a movie, but then also looks at Superman as a movie on IMDb, you'll probably be able to see that the websites are also formatted similarly. It's just the content that's different, right? So views, again, are templates of how we want to ultimately display our content. So once we've received the instance of the movie that I want to see, and once I've plugged it into the template of HTML that what I would use to just demonstrate one movie, the view returns this information to the controller, and the controller sends this information back to the browser, and the browser displays it. This is a lot of information, and I don't expect you to get this all right now. But as we continue through this lecture and then through the material next week or the third week of Sinatra, it'll all start making a lot of sense to you. But I just kind of wanted to take this diagram of the request response cycle for the server and show you how we're going to map this to the inner workings of Sinatra. Are there any immediate questions about the request response cycle in a generic way, or in how we're going to apply it with Sinatra? Is there anything that I can, on this kind of first go through, explain a little bit more? By the end of the lecture today, we're going to see all of this in action. We'll see this entire diagram in action. Okay. So we've discussed MVC. We've talked about request response cycle, a super quick intro to HTTP methods. Now I'm just going to discuss RAC really quick. RAC is something called middleware, and middleware is a term that you're going to be hearing a lot, basically in every library or framework that we learn. Middleware is just an application or a series of, I guess you can consider it kind of, it's an interface that mediates between what our application is doing and how servers behave, right? Whenever there's kind of a bridge between languages or operations, we need something in the middle that will translate information from the server into something that our Sinatra application can understand, and something that our Sinatra application can understand into what a server could understand, right? Obviously, technologies are very different. They've been birthed from different ideas using different technology. So middleware is something that we're going to be using a lot. Middleware doesn't always have to necessarily be something between two completely separate operations. It can also be something that we can apply into how a library is supposed to work. Middleware is a huge concept, but the takeaway that I would just say here is that RAC is middleware that interfaces between servers and our Sinatra application. Now, for the purposes of our application and developing all of this, you're going to be using your computers as servers, or local hosts is what you'll see they're called. Obviously, we're not hosting our applications just yet on a server on the internet where it's live full time, but we can as you'll soon be doing, you'll be able to host your application live locally from your own server. So no one else will be able to see it, from another computer unless you're all sharing a network. But yeah, you'll be able to host your applications on your server and they will behave as if they were live, right? And we'll come back to rack in a second because we're going to need a file in our active record application to ultimately put our application on the server so that we can see it in the browser. So that brings me to this next step. We're going to bootstrap our active record application to include Sinatra. And that means that we have to go into our gem file. And finally, I'm going to include Sinatra here. We've got active record, Sinatra active record, and then finally Sinatra. And then I'm going to use the require all gem because my environment file is getting a little long. Let's bundle install our 2 new gems. Okay. And in my environment file, I'm just going to say require all and just take this app folder. Now, the one file that I said we needed to add is called a config.ru file. And RU stands for rack up. This, like our gem file and our rig file, our application is going to look for, oops, this should be in the home directory. Our application is going to look for, oh, I forgot one gem. The gem is called shotgun. And the shotgun gem is going to be responsible for hosting our application locally on our computers, on our servers. Let's include this one as well. Okay. So I've got my configure.ru file. All I want to do here really is require my my environment file. And then before we get any further, I just want to let's see, make one more configuration. So our application is now moving beyond just an active record application. We're not just dealing with models anymore. In our application folder, we're actually going to be creating files for the 3 main components of our application as we've seen that relates to the pattern that we're using to build our application. We're going to put our models in a folder. I forget if it's plural, if it's singular. Models, I think it's plural. Models, our views, and our controllers. And I'm going to just take all of my model files and plop them in the models. And then in my controllers file, for now, I'm just going to make one file called my application controller. Jen, do you know if it's supposed to be capitalized? Let me look. I think it's not. I have it right here.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like most of them aren't capitalized, but
yeah, it's lowercase. Cool. Yeah, I don't know why I wanted to do that. Again, our controller, our application controller is the main switchboard for our application. Our config.ru file is going to use our application controller as the switchboard to receive URLs, to receive routes, right, from the browser and determine if someone's trying to visit our application at the home page, what should they see? If someone's trying to visit our application at a route that has, something after the slash, what should they see, right? So this is going to be called class application controller, and it's going to inherit instead of active record base from Sinatra's base this time. And so far, we're gonna populate this here in just a second. But I just want to get this kind of basic up and running before we configure it and add other things. And then in our config.u file, we're going to say we want to use our application controller. So in our rack file again, we're requiring our environment, and then we're telling the config.u file, it's saying anytime we get requests to this application from the browser, use the application controller to determine what to do. Oh, I think it's run application. Run, use, run. It's run application controller. Yeah. Run the application controller to determine what to do. And then at this point, I think that's all we need. We should be able to just run shotgun in our command line, and we'll see that we're given a local URL, right? A position in our server, a port in our server where our application is being run. And if I go and I put in that, that URL, we see that although we haven't specified a page to show this route yet, our application is live. The browser is recognizing that we're working with the Sinatra application. And you'll find that as we move on, the debugging tools for our applications just get better and better and better. For example, this application is literally telling me what to do. It's saying, try going into your application RB or application controller file and putting in this function and seeing what happens, right? So I'm going to do just that. Let's see what we get. Now if I refresh the page, we have the words hello world come up on the screen. Okay, so let's do a recap really quickly. Let's review let's review this right now, right? So my application is being hosted locally on my server, right, on my computer. And when I click enter, I'm going to just kind of the home page, right? There's no domain name for this application yet. It's just the location on my server, the port on my server. So when I make this request, I'm making a get request, right, to kind of the home page, right? I'm making a get request to the home page. So I'm sending a message to my controller. I'm saying, hey, I, the user, just want to go to the home page, right? Config.ru says send everything through the application controller. The application's controller is going to determine what happens. Inside of my application controller, I have a method that's written a little bit bizarre, but basically how this works is we say what kind of request this is. Again, there are 5, but the important one to know for now is just get. And then in this string here, we can determine the path that we want the user, we determine the path. How would I describe this? Right, if a user is visiting the homepage, this is the path for the homepage, right? And then we're saying, if they're visiting the homepage, this is what we want to do. Right now, our logic here is very simple. We're just saying return a string called hello world in the browser, right? But we can get more specific, of course. We can say get, say hello to Jen. And then we can just return, hey, Jen, right? And now in my application, I can go to / say hello to Jen. And the return is going to be what I specified. So based on my route, right, or based on the path that I'm trying to visit on my application, the application controller is using this as a switchboard and saying, is the route this? No. Is it this? Yes. Okay, let's run this code, right? You kind of get my point. I'm just kind of we can create as many routes as we want that do any behavior that we want, right? So if we're looking at this diagram right now, the browser is kind of going to the controller, right? And then it's kind of going, it's not really going to a view. We haven't really specified this yet. It's just kind of returning HTML based on the string or the data type that we're putting into this return, right? So we're not really fully completing this yet, right? Well, before I continue, are there any questions so far about the request response cycle in this really primitive version of Sinatra?
Chris, you might be getting to this, but what if I accidentally name two routes the same thing? Which one will actually show up?
This is a good point. So if I say hello to Jen as well, what do you all think is going to happen?
I think it'll only go to the first one, or the one that it hits first.
Okay, Alex says there's going to be an error. Anna says it's going to be the first one that hits. Kizito also says it's going to be the first one that hits. Let's see. So both of these routes are say hello to Jen. One says, hey, Jen. The other says, hi, Chris. Let's see. Nithelbert says it's going to hit the first one as well. And you're right. It does just hit the first one. The application controller compares the routes from top to bottom, and it's going to go with the first one that matches. Very important to know, because later down the line, we're going to add some wildcards to our routes. And it's very important to make sure that you're putting things in order so that you don't have a false positive as far as a match in your controller action based on your route. So always keep this in mind. This is definitely something that comes up for me when I give project reviews for Sinatra. I always intentionally try to trick the students into placing a route in an incorrect place to see if they can figure out why it's not reaching the route that they had assumed or wanted to. So always important to remember that the order in which you declare your routes does matter. Okay, so again, let's take this and let's incorporate the models aspect of this diagram, right? So let's say that I want a user to be able to go to Jurassic Park, like I said. And I want them to be able to see which actors are in this movie. So in my controller, I have access to active record here. It's really important to remember that everything is connected at this point. I can write Ruby code and talk to my database directly from my application controller, from my controller itself. So I can go ahead and say Jurassic Park is movie.findby. I can specify that I'm trying to find a movie by the title and say I'm looking for a movie that's called Jurassic Park. And then maybe what I want to do is I want to iterate, I want to say something like the director is, and then interpolate the director's name, right? And if I visit this route in my application, I should see that the director is Steven Spielberg. So if we're looking at this diagram again, we can see how, although the way that the diagram makes it look like it's going off and doing something somewhere else. The controller itself, you're right. I guess that is true. See, we're writing a SQL query, and the SQL query is going off and talking to our database. Active Record is talking to our database, and then returning the instance of the movie model that we want back to the controller, right? And we haven't quite gotten to the view part yet, but I've, inside of my controller, determined the information that I want from that instance in my database, right? And then I'm returning it to the user. So I'm saying if a user wants to know about Jurassic Park, first in my controller, I go and find the movie Jurassic Park, and then I determine which of the information I want the user to see, right? Any questions so far? All right, so let's kind of go full circle and complete this diagram and incorporate the views. I always forget how to do this, so I'm just going to go back and look at my old code. Okay, configure do set views. So we're basically going to go ahead and tell our application that all of the views that we're going to use are inside of this file. We're saying the views are inside of app views, which is true. And then moving forward, we'll be able to reference our views quite easily from any of our application controller methods. So inside of views, let's say that I want to have a view for just an individual movie, a single movie, right? You'll learn a convention about naming these. I guess it'll be better if I start with the convention now. If you ever just want to show a user one of something, so we have several movies, right? But we only want to show a user one movie. We call this the show page, right? This is just, I guess for the purposes of this, I'll say show movie. I'll just call it show. Show.erb. You can also say show.erb.html. The HTML is kind of inferred. The file name or the file tag, it's called an ERB file. ERB stands for enriched Ruby. And I'll write that here. ERB stands for, it's embedded Ruby. Embedded Ruby. In ERB files, we are allowed to write Ruby that lives alongside HTML. Pretty cool. So inside here, and this is where the bonus section for the HTML comes in, because our Sinatra applications, we're going to be relying heavily on HTML. So if you don't know too much HTML right now, it's okay. If you start struggling with it, maybe it'd be wise to go check out a few of the initial bonuses, or just talk with somebody else about learning the basic tags. The curriculum will be pretty good about telling you what you need to know. And I think as you grow as a developer, you'll see that there are kind of like 5 main tags that you really need to know about. But in this case here, let's just start playing around. And I'm going to say, this is a show page for a movie, right? And in my application controller, so to go back to this diagram again, remember that the request response cycle behaves in this way. We receive a route. The controller determines which of the routes that we've matched it matches, or that we've written, it matches with. And then once it matches with one of our methods, that method has code inside of it that determines what to do. We already went to go grab a movie, right? We grabbed Jurassic Park. And the other thing that now we have to do is grab a view. Well, how do we want to display this to the user, right? Right now, our application is just showing plain text. There's really no HTML here, and we can't really put much HTML here. We don't want to put a lot of HTML in the controller. We use that for views. The views handle all of the HTML for us. So I'm going to tell my application that I want to use the show view, for the movie that we just made. So I do this, I do it like this. I say ERB, and I say show. I think I can just do show like that. Let's run this method again. And we should see the HTML, big H1 tag saying this is a show page for movie. Super cool. So we can kind of see within the code here, the entirety of the request response cycle happening, right? We're sending a URL, we're typing a URL into the browser, right? The route hits the controller. The controller goes through each of the routes that we've written methods for and matches the route to one of the methods. It says, okay, cool. Here's the route that the user has typed in. It matches one in the controller. The first thing that I'm going to do is determine, based on the route that the user has typed in, I, the coder, decide what the user should see. I know that the user visiting Jurassic Park wants to see the Jurassic Park movie. So I'm going to go talk to Active Record, tell it to go into the database and find that record for me. It's going to go back to the controller with that with that instance of a movie. And then we're going to determine what view we want to show that to the user. So I'm saying I want to use the show view, right? The only thing that we're kind of missing here is that we were using this hard-coded, or this plain text to render information to the user. And now we don't have that, right? Right now I just have hard-coded, this is a show page for a movie. So the question becomes, how do I get this information from the, how do I get this information or this instance of a movie into my show page? And does anybody have an idea of how I would do that? For those of you who have maybe taken a peek at Sinatra already. Yeah, Nathelbert says we can use instance variables. Now, don't overthink this. The purpose of instance variables here is different than instance variables, and we have used them before. It's important to not necessarily think about this as the class application controller has an instance variable. It is kind of behaving that way, but the Sinatra is utilizing the power of instance variables to communicate information from the controller to the view, right? So I'm going to actually save this instance of Jurassic Park the movie to an instance variable called movie. And with a little bit of Sinatra magic, well, that doesn't require us really doing anything. The application is going to communicate this instance variable to our ERB file, and we actually have access to it inside of our ERB file if we use a special ERB syntax known as ERB tags. Let me see if I should have, okay, here we go. So depending on what text editor you have, you can download keyboard shortcuts to create these ERB tags. There are really kind of two ERB tags. There's this one, which I was taught is called a squid. I guess that kind of makes sense. Here's like the head and the eyes and like the tentacles. And then the closing tag will always be like this. We call this like an I was told to call this an ice cream cone. Or you can do code like this, which is just two ice cream cones. So we have squid ice cream cone or ice cream cone ice cream cone. The difference between these two is we'll use the ice cream cone to type in Ruby logic that we don't want to display to the user, right? We can iterate in ERB. We can, if I instead had passed an array of all of the movies in my database, to this view, I could have said movie.all.each do, right? And then we could have, we can iterate. But whenever we want to display information to the user, we use the squid. So in this case, I want to say something like, here's the director, and we can reference the instance variable here. And I say the movie.director.name. And then I'll actually go ahead and do some iteration here. I can say, here are the actors in the movie, right? And I'll do, maybe I'll do this. I'll just an h2 tag. h2, and and then I'll say actors, and I'll use the, let's see, I forget how to, I always have to remember this keyboard shortcut. I'll say at movie, we know that there are several actors in the movie, right? So I'll say at movie.actors dot each do actor. And I will warn you that depending on your text editor, they don't always like ERB, and you might not always get the satisfaction of the colors changing. I think that this is particularly a problem with Atom. You may have better luck with VS Code or Sublime, but I have, from experience, realized that Atom doesn't give me the satisfaction of changing the colors for me when I'm writing an ERB all of the time. So we're iterating over every movie, right? And every actor, and then I want the user to see the name of the actor, right? And then, like always, we're in an iteration, so we need to end our iteration here. All right, so to recap really quickly what I just did, we determined that a user's visiting Jurassic Park wants to see Jurassic Park. We save this instance of the movie to an instance variable, and then we render the show view, right? Inside of the show view, I have access to the instance variable that holds the movie instance in it, and I'm using ERB to call methods on this instance of a movie to extract information in it, out of it, so that it will appear to my user in the browser. And let's test it out and see if it works. Cool. And I guess I could actually go in here. This is the show page 4. And believe it or not, I can also write ERB in here. This is the show page 4, and now it should say Jurassic Park, right? Sweet. Notice here how, because these instance variables are not necessarily explicit, right? They're not hard-coded. These are instance variables, right? So we can change them, meaning that we can reuse this show page for any time we want to show somebody a different movie. Like if I found the movie, Binding or Crimea River was another one I wrote. I don't remember exactly how I wrote it. Let's see if this shows up. We might get an error if I didn't type it in correctly. Yeah, this is a show page for Crimea River. Here's the director. I didn't associate any actors, right? So you can see that we can reuse this show page over and over and over again. When we return from the break and we continue lessons on Sinatra, we'll talk more about how we really organize our folders, our controllers, our models, and our views. And then we'll talk more about the conventions of RESTful routing as they pertain to HTTP methods and yeah, the MVC pattern. So that's really it. Are there any questions before I let you all go? Okay. Let's see what I have here. Thanks, Alex. All right, so I hope that you have all seen how simple it was for me to take this active record application and just put Bootstrap in it. I made one file, I downloaded 2 extra gems, and I made an application controller file. Changed my environment up a little bit, but now we're hosting applications on our local hosts, and your applications will soon, you'll be able to experience in the browser. Great, that's it. If we don't see you, have a great break week. Please be in touch with me and Jen. And I will see you all when we get back. Thank you.